Hey there, everybody. P. Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of In the Prog Seat. It's Tuesday night. We're talking prog, and we've got in the house today Mr. Chad Hutchinson, the professor of prog, Ken Golden, all the way up from Canada. We've got Rick Labonte and Armando Venditti, and
Hello.
my fellow New Yorker, Chuck Alvarez.
Let's
Greetings,
go
gentlemen.
Mets.
Hey, good day.
So,
Good evening.
after the split, the albums after the split, who did it better? This is part two of a kind of an ongoing every now and then series. We've had some high profile breaks in prog history, and this is one of them. So after The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway album, Peter Gabriel decides to leave Genesis and go on a solo career. They're very sad. They hold auditions. They audition lots of singers. Nobody works out. And then they decide, hey, how about the funny looking guy playing drums? He sings pretty well. Maybe he can do it. And that's what they decided to go with. So they release Trick of the Tail with Mr. Phil Collins playing drums and singing lead vocals for the first time ever across the entire album. That's released in February of 1976. Exactly 1 year later, February 1977, Mr. Gabriel comes out with his first solo album produced by Bob Ezrin, Peter Gabriel, self-titled, or Peter Gabriel 1, or the Car album, or the Raindrop album, whatever the hell you want to call it. Two pretty fine releases. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have each person here talk about both of these albums, what they like about them, what they don't like about them, and basically who do they think did it better? Which album in the end turns out to be the stronger effort of the two after the split? So we're going to start with Chuck, Armando, Ken, Rick, Chad, myself. So Chuck, what do you think of these two albums?
All right. I love both of these albums. What's that? My favorite band, once again, I was kind of fortunate that I discovered them much later in life, or else I probably would have been just as devastated as everyone else that was a Genesis fan post The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Let's go with one album first. The first album that came out after the split was Genesis's A Trick of the Tail, which came out February 2nd, 1976 on Atco Records. This is an album, people just thought that, once Peter Gabriel left, that these guys were just left bare. But we were proven wrong. The very first song from A Dance on the Volcano, you got to hear that Genesis could actually rock. That all four members really stepped up their game on this. You have Steve Hackett's Beautiful and Tangled. You have Squonk. And my personal favorite off the album, Mad Moon, which is a song that, sadly they never played live. And then Robbery, Assault, and Battery. It's like their little hints of, jazz fusion there. And then you have The Haunting Ripples. And I'm probably like one of the few people that actually love the title track. I've always liked it, regardless of whether or not they saw this tweet or so. Always loved it. And then to close off with the album with Los Endos, man, this is just a smoking track. How they always said Phil Collins was very big into Weather Report and Santana at this time, and Mahavishnu Orchestra. And these guys, they really brought it with this album. So this is a pretty fine album. Then you have Peter Gabriel that took a 2-year hiatus, to raise his family, what's a daughter that was pretty unhealthy when she was born in 1974. And then you have, then you also have problems with his wife. There was a little marital problems there, but he was able to get everything all rectified when he did his first album. His first album, you could call it Car. You could call it Peter Gabriel 1. You could call it Peter Gabriel 1977. It was released the 25th of February, 1977 on Atco Records. And another album that starts off with A Smoker. Peter Gabriel, I know that as time went on, he tried to distance himself away from Genesis. But, there were quite a few songs here that still had that Genesis-like vibe, although he controlled it. He had no controlling Tony Banks wanting to take over on the keyboards. and there's no infighting between the guitarists trying to duke it out there. But Moribund, the Burgermeister, sounds like a lost track from the Landlines down on Broadway. Then you have his most famous song in Salisbury's Hill. Modern Love used to get a lot of airplay here in New York City. And then all the other songs from here onward. And so, Excuse Me, always like that song. Humdrum is a beautiful song. Which are kind of like dates to like things, which are the songs on his third album and his fourth album. Slow Burn is a beautiful song. And I always like Waiting for the Big One. And Down the Dolce Vita, get a little boogie on in there. But one of the songs, this song over here, the very last song of the album, Here Comes the Flood. I never understood why he felt it was so bombastic. It was a song that he never played like that. He always played like a calmer piano version of it. And I always liked that version of Here Comes the Flood. So when it comes to this album, Peter Gabriel came out strong in the gates, but he would do much better. Now if I was going to pick between these two albums, it's very tough, man, because once again, I do love Peter Gabriel 1, but on this one over here, it's a trick of the tail, and in my opinion, it's not even close. That as great as Peter Gabriel 1 is, and so A Trick of a Tail is my favorite of the two, and on most occasions, and probably now, it is my favorite Genesis album. So that's my number one. Genesis, A Trick of a Tail as my pick for between the two albums.
Cool. And for those watching, Chuck was wearing this very spectacular Trick of the Tail shirt in black the other day, which I thought was really nice. That looks good in black.
It really does.
Art anyway, right?
It really does, man.
As opposed to the yellow, right, or whatever this kind of weird color is. So.
Yep. Ferraro yellow.
Ferraro yellow, yes. That's right.
You are detailed though, Chuck. I'll give you that.
All right, Armando, your take on these two gems.
Well, my take is, as I was saying to you before we started taping, I heavily got into Genesis in my 20s and early 20s. And I went out one day and I bought the entire catalog, unbeknownst to someone else. Anyways, that's another story. Anyways, the first album that I gravitated towards was, in fact, A Trick of the Tail. Again, it was the first album without Peter Gabriel. And just a little history on it, I think Genesis had a lot to prove with this album, because there was a lot of speculation in the media that, Gabriel's out, Genesis are done, can they do it? And I think I like this album because it's more linear. It's stripped back somewhat, and it's more accessible than, say, Nursery Crime, Foxtrot, the albums previous, Selling England by the Pound. The track listing from top to bottom can't be beat. Dancing on a Volcano, as a starter, just comes out of the gate and you're just like, okay, there's something here. There's something that, that your ears can, the audible that you can hold on to, that you can hook into, and it gets your attention. And, the ethereal and tangled and, just beautiful use of Mellotron. Like, I know you love Mellotron, right? And
typical prog.
I think everybody loves Mellotron on this call.
Yeah, exactly. It's very ethereal.
Fun to play.
And Squonk was the track. I don't know if people know this, but Squonk was the track that Phil Collins literally tried out first to see if he could sing it. Because they were auditioning these singers, and he would teach them the songs. And for some reason, these singers were not cutting it. And Phil Collins just said, let me give it a shot. Let me just give it a shot. And they listened back to it and they liked it. And I thought, okay, maybe there's something here. We don't have to look outside. The one that was most reluctant was Banks, right? Tony Banks, because he thought, Peter Gabriel has such a strong presence, concert-wise, like doing the costumes and the mystical traveler, type of communication that you have with the audience. Whereas Phil Collins, he had more of a, guy next door kind of thing, like a neighbor down the street kind of a situation. So Banks was more, can he do this? In listening to the album, and I listened to it again today and from last week, he nailed it. He nailed it. Vocally, he was in top form. The songs, again, from top to bottom, just work. And you don't want to skip any tracks on it. And it was the album I fell in love with at first, like head over heels kind of a thing, if you can, with an album. The Peter Gabriel album, Car album, he had, if not more, to prove than Genesis did, because they were a known entity, as a group. He was coming out of the gate on his own. Can he do this? And listening to the album, he pulled it off. I mean, the album is basically a continuation of where he was in Genesis. Everyone, I mean, I remember hearing Salisbury Hill as a kid, and what I do like about the album is the variety of it. You've got the prog, you've got the prog moments, you've got the pop of Salisbury, the folk pop of Salisbury Hill, you've got the barbershop quartet of, Excuse Me, and just, and not to go over every single track, but I mean, there's a variety on the album that works. And Here Comes the Flood, where that was the one song that hooked in Bob Ezrin when he met with him to produce it. He sang him the melody for the song, and he said he went home that night humming the song in his head, and he said, if I hum a song just from an idea, then I'm hooked, then I like it. So it's a strong album, but I'm gonna give the lead to the nod to Genesis. I'm sorry, it's just because I've had more time with that album. I literally fell in love with that album, and it can't be beat. I'm sorry. Over Peter Gabriel.
Gotta go what you got, right? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. It's my favorite album.
Cool. Ken.
Do you guys want the softball list first or the hardball list?
Let's go for the softball.
Whatever you want to do.
I was just kidding.
I was getting ready for it.
I guess maybe if we would have broken out, like, please don't touch us. So, Trick of the Tail. I have a sentimental attachment to the album. It was my first Genesis album. Really, that's the album I got into Genesis with. And to me, I don't want to call it a perfect album, but it's pretty close to being a perfect Genesis album to me. The way I hear the album, I don't hear much on here that Peter Gabriel couldn't have sung. So what I guess I'm trying to say is it was a very smooth transition. It was almost as if the material was just there waiting for Gabriel, and Phil came in, and they have similar voices. They used to hear them harmonize on Selling England and The Lamp. So it wasn't like a huge leap for Phil to come in and fill the role. And as I go through the album, I could easily hear Peter singing on these songs. It's a Genesis album. It's not, it's more Selling England than we always, we talked about in the past. The Lamb was the outlier, That was the oddball.
Yep.
It's almost like a musical continuation from Selling England. It's
I
a
agree.
very English album. It's an English prog rock record. It's got, it just has that flavor. The more commercial stuff were to come later. This is just a pure prog album, and in terms of quality, it's as good as anything they did before. Really, I mean, it's just fantastic material. It's got it all. It's got the Mellotron. It's got great Steve Hackett. It's what this is what you want in a Genesis album. Would you want it with Phil or Peter? Well, that's up to you. Whatever you prefer. But it's a great record. And as I said, I have a strong sentimental attachment to it. Now, Peter's first album, that's to me a very interesting album, and I hadn't listened to it in a long time. It's kind of like the anti-Genesis album. It's like he went out of his way to make an album that doesn't sound like Genesis in terms of the content, in terms of the production. Now, Genesis albums were never great sounding albums. Trick is probably the best sounding of them, but it wasn't like ELP and Yes had Eddie Offord. Genesis had David Hitchcock. They had David Henschel. They had different guys, but they never made a spectacular sounding album. But there was kind of like a Genesis sound. The first Peter Gabriel album, he picked Bob Ezrin, and I mean, Bob Ezrin, he worked with Alice Cooper, and he brings in Dick Wagner and Steve Hunter, and who play with Alice Cooper. A lot of session guys, Alan Schwartzberg. I mean, it was Tony Levin, who was a session player. I mean, he was playing with Paul Simon at the time, right? And those guys.
Robert Fripp.
Yeah. Well, yeah. He went out of his way in terms of the material and in terms of the production to make it sound completely different from a Genesis record. More just like Chuck said, it's funny that Chuck said that. I never really made the connection, but recently revisiting the record, listening to Moribund, I think it had to do with the vocal treatment. It almost sounds like it could have fit on the Lamb.
Yep.
Very much so, yeah.
Yeah. The other thing, Peter, we know he became a pretty good pop singer, right? And Salisbury Hill was the first song. You got a little bit of everything. He was just trying to sound very contemporary. No two songs sounds alike. There's one crappy song on there. I hated Excuse Me. That was, to me, that was just like a throwaway. But I
It's
hated
the
that.
outlier in this on the
Yeah,
album.
but some of his, you could point to certain songs on the album that are signature pieces: Humdrum, Slow Burn, and Here Comes the Flood. Of course, Salisbury Hill is his most popular, probably his best known. But you had the bombast of Down the Dolce Vita. Kind of strange. I mean, again, I kind of go back to the production. He lost a lot of the character that he had when he was in Genesis. He was just trying to be like this chameleon and show all these different styles. It's a good album because the material overall is really, really good. I don't like the production on it. I guess I think I've driven that point home. And for him, I think there were better albums to come. But, but again, a great record, I think. Just, if we're going by his solo career, maybe my least favorite, or maybe Scratch. Maybe Scratch, Scratch was number 2, right? Yeah. And that would, maybe that, yeah, it'd be a kind of a coin toss. And it's actually kind of funny because with Scratch, he went in the exact opposite direction of this. Yep. He had Fripp produce, and he went with this very, very austere production where everything is stripped down. Here, there's just layers and layers of stuff. It's almost like Peter's hiding behind it.
Almost murky, kind of.
Yeah, yeah, there's so much. There's
It's a
so much.
typical Ezrin production from the
Yeah,
70s.
that's what I
Yeah,
think.
and I don't like it. Maybe it works with Alice Cooper and what
Mhm.
Kiss, and that's fine. But for a guy who is, who's staking a prog rock singer, staking a career as a solo artist, I don't think it works. I mean, I don't have a problem with any of the players on there, but just in terms of the production, I think it holds the album back. But still, we're talking about, when we say like the least favorite, we're still talking about a pretty great album. I mean, there's just the material is that strong. So for me, the obvious winner is Trick of the Tail, because that's for me, that's one of the all-time great prog albums.
Cool. All right, Rick.
Okay, well, anybody that's been faithful to the watching in the Prog Seat is no spoiler alert. They know Trick of the Trail is my favorite album from Genesis, and for the reason that we have already heard, I like it sonically. I just like the way they wrote stuff, but and I agree with Ken. After hearing Peter sing for all those years, and he can mimic his voice, he put that same personality in some of these songs, but. They also got better at the studio, and they got better at dubbing and working on these voices. And I mean, there's some incredible stuff here. And so it's always been one of my favorite. And for all the reasons that everybody talked about so far, Dance on a Volcano, show them, as a band, to move them forward, and Tango, sweet Beatle-like / maybe even Beach Boys vocally, which I like that stuff, ear candy stuff to me when it comes to that. I'm very moved on the Madman Moon, just like Chuck was saying, but I'm a big fan of the title track. A Trick of a Tail has such an amazing hook, and to me, who love vocals and vocal harmonies and had to do that myself, I really appreciate what Phil did. If he never sang, you would never know it. He sang his ass off, and vocally, the band really shine. And it's interesting because if you get the anniversary copy, there are also videos. And I remember that video of him walking in the piano before I really knew this band was going on. And that's also speak to the next album. I remember seeing the video of Peter Gabriel back in the day. So, but anyway, I really love this record, and so it's really powerful. But let's talk about another great statement. The difference is between the two. Phil had some backing. They tried bringing a guest, it didn't work, and they just followed. And the trick of the tail was letting the drummer do the trick, and so that was amazing. Where Peter, he took a little break, so he wasn't sure where he's going. But I honestly like the partnership with Bob Ezrin. I'm different with Ken, because to me, I don't want to hear just the Euro pop of the part of him. I like the rock and stuff, the modern love. I know Bob had a big hand in that. I know Bob had a big hand in some of that theatrical stuff that Peter can deliver. And so I think it works well with this band. I just think if you were looking for another lost lamb, you could be disappointed. But to me, I think some of the music that he brought out, Genesis could have really worked with it. I'm not saying all of it, because there's just some songs that are just so different, departure from the band. Almost like when Robert Plant went from Led Zeppelin, almost wanted to make a statement on his own, but gave you a couple of songs that gave you that flavor of Led Zeppelin on it. And I felt the same way with this album. There's some moments that I said, man, if Genesis had a handle on this tune would have kicked ass, and there's no question about it. So let's talk about some of the main thing. Like, I love Modern Love. Excuse me, I like that sense of humor. It's a tongue-in-cheek kind of English thing. But you would have probably got more songs like that hadn't Bob Ezrin give them some, say, you got to make American funny or A&R kind of radio music. Because he's also aware of what's going on at the time. Humdrum, I agree with Chuck. It's just a beautiful production and gives you the sense of prog imagination. Slow Burn, love that tune. And, my love affair for the blues, I love waiting for the big one. And I love the big sound of it all. And then the last two tracks showed that he came from a prog band before. the last two tracks is like an epic way of saying, yeah. And this is what he had to offer. So you get a little bit of that European pop, which this album gives you a sneak preview of where he's gonna take. But like you guys said, he goes really different. But it gives you a sneak of what the '80s. Because honestly, when I heard the second tune, Sawbury Hill, I honestly remembered it as like an '80s song, not 1977.
Yep.
And you know what I mean? Like if I were to think of Live Aid, I would picture that song happening at that time. But it's actually pretty early, so he's kind of like giving you a sneak preview of what to come. And Genesis, Trick of the Tail, give you pieces of what Genesis would do, a little bit, snippets of it, because of the some of the electronic drums are starting to come into the picture, and some of that reverse gate and some effect. But for the most part, they're still analog, all of them, and they still sound wonderful. That they're not totally digital. They got the best of both worlds. So you know where I'm going with this. I just want to say Peter Gabriel made a great statement in my mind. I am impressed. I like, way to go. And I seen him in concert a couple of times. The first time was he closed Woodstock '94 on a Sunday night, and it was pouring rain, and everybody was there because he had the crowd in the palm of his hand. And I remember being so impressed with Biko and all these tunes that were so melodic and memorable that I went and got this record when I got home. And I was like, I'm 24 years old. So I had a lot of history, but not as much as the Trick of the Tail. But I would still say, great statement, proud of it, but Trick of the Tail's got to get it because Genesis rule, and that's my favorite album from him. So here we go.
All right.
I sense a trend going on here.
Yeah, I know, right? We're pretty predictable here, I guess, today. But
One thing I want to mention, so because it's on my mind, if anybody collects vinyl, this version on Direct Disc Labs is an anomaly because the version of Slow Burn, which opens up side 2, has a piano intro, about a 40-second piano intro that was not on the regular release.
It's usually faded
It's like
out.
they used like an alternate. They were given an alternate tape to cut from. It's kind of cool. Just nice.
Yeah.
Just quickly too, it's going to come across that we're slagging Peter Gabriel. We're not. I mean,
Oh,
he
no,
didn't-
not at all.
I haven't gone yet.
No,
You're
no.
giving me a
One
chance.
winner.
Yeah,
he had an influence on other bands. I mean, Salisbury Hill, for example, has been covered by Saga on a compilation that did, and from even the synth group Erasure from England, they did a version of Salisbury Hill on their album Other People's Songs. So I mean, he had an influence on people. Like these songs are ingrained in our society, like in our culture, kind of thing. So yeah, it's like, he is a multi-talented artist, and he's really good.
oh yeah, yeah. We're talking at two really fine albums here. So it's like they're not separated by that much.
We're
Chad, what do you
picking,
got?
we're picking nits.
Yeah, we are.
I don't think anyone here would deny the greatness of Peter Gabriel. No way.
Not at all.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So that said, I hate this album. No, I'm kidding. I want to start actually where Rick's. I'm going to disagree a little bit with Rick. Whereas I can hear Peter Gabriel singing the Trick of the Tail songs, I have a hard time taking just about anything but More Than the Burgermeister from the first Peter Gabriel album and hearing Genesis on that. He took such a departure. Like Ken was saying, he was very deliberate of trying to come up with a modern, shiny, different type sounding album, from the songwriting to the production. So yeah, I don't hear that. I think there's a major split, and only little bits and pieces do you get of his past in Genesis.
Yeah,
Part of Moribund, Slow Burn, or a Humdrum has a little Mellotron in there. I just think there's little bits. There's not much progressive rock going on in this album. I do like most of the variation on this album. I like the upbeat tracks, which almost are a little, I guess at the time they were pretty out of character for him. Modern Love, Slow Burn, Down the Dolce Vita, all upbeat, kind of 4/4 kind of things. Then you have Salisbury Hill, though, which is probably everybody's favorite song in 7/4. These people listen to radio. And Humdrum, I would say, is probably the most underrated track on here. It's really a great song. Like, I've gone back and revisited this album a few times since Pete brought up the topic, and it's a solid album. I like it better than the second one. I don't like it as much as Melt, but I do like this album a lot. Like Ken, I can do without Excuse Me. That just does not need to be on here for me. I don't need a barbershop quartet. I don't listen to them on purpose. And honestly, Waiting for the Big One doesn't need to be 7-some minutes long, and it feels like a Randy Newman reject. It's the way it kind of plods along just reminds me of Randy Newman, and I can do without those two. So to try to compare this, as good as this album is, and we've all said it, to try to compare it to A Trick of the Tail, where there's not a stinker on it. Every song on here you could throw on and be like, that's a great song. But actually, real quick, back to the point that with hearing Peter Gabriel sing these songs, and some people saying, hey, I actually like the song Trick of the Tail. That was actually written on 72 and was possibly going to be on Foxtrot, but never made it. So
I didn't know that.
that would be interesting to hear Peter Gabriel sing.
You can envision Gabriel singing that song.
Yeah.
It's not a stretch at all.
Right.
No, exactly.
But a lot of the things I love about Genesis are on, or about music in general from that era, are on this album. You got the 12-string guitars, you got Steve Hackett's electric guitars.
Yeah.
You've got
Audible.
you got Tony Banks doing just phenomenal work.
Yeah.
Phil Collins is at his peak. He has proven himself more than worthy vocalist on this album. Comes out of the gates with no hesitation and just nails it.
Yeah.
Dance to the Volcano remains probably my favorite Genesis song. So to this point, it is going to be a sweep. I am going Trick of the Tail. Wait, should I straight arm it? There we go.
Oh, we got it.
But that's not taking anything away from the first Peter Gabriel album. This is a really solid album. It's got a great lineup of musicians. And I do like this version of Here Comes the Flood. I think I do like the stripped down version a little bit better. I think the guitar solo in it, which actually wasn't played by Fripp, it was played by Dick Wagner, feels a little out of place for the tone of the rest of the album. So I like the stripped down version better, but I do like this one. And I know that's one of Peter's issues with the album in general, is that it's overproduced, especially that track. But Trick of the Tail wins, but high marks for the first Peter Gabriel album. Really solid record.
Right on. Wasn't it Steve Hunter, not Dick Wagner? Steve Hunter
Plays on a lot of the rest of the album, but
Okay.
Yeah, I think
Dick Wagner
Steve
plays the solo on that one.
I think Steve Hunter plays on Waiting for the Big One.
I know they're duo partners. They play a lot
Yeah.
with Alice Cooper and everybody else.
Yeah, I didn't know that Salisbury Hill went back as far back as 72. But when you,
Trick of the Tail.
Trick of the Tail.
oh no, wait,
Trick of the Tail.
sorry. Okay,
He couldn't have written Salisbury Hill yet. He didn't leave Genesis yet.
no. Oh, sorry, I got mixed up. There, my
He was
apologies.
planning on leaving it.
Right. Early stages.
What's a slightly off? So, back to A Trick of the Tail. We tend to forget Mike Rutherford's contributions to the album. He's such a unsung bassist. I think that he's a phenomenal bass player. We tend to forget about his bass playing, like on the title track. Parts of Dancing on the Volcano. Squonk. When he does play a little bit towards the end. He's tend to be his songwriting on here is pretty fantastic. And then also, like I said, his bass playing. So we can't forget Mike Rutherford. His contribution.
Did he slide you a 20 to say that, Chuck?
I'm sorry.
Did he slide you a 20 to say that?
But you can't dismiss that you played with that.
I think we can all agree.
I would like a little bit more.
I think we can agree
Phil
that
been
they
playing for so
underused
many years,
Steve
so.
Hackett.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hackett's great on this album.
Yeah.
They underused him. Like they could have used more. But
Oh,
Well,
Okay, we're not going to go down that hole. again.
possibly, but I would argue that you probably hear more of him on this album than a couple of the other ones that came before it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I would
well, you
agree.
can always
I would agree.
get more Hackett, in my opinion. So.
It's the between these two albums too. The interesting thing is the way guitar is used on the Peter Gabriel album is a little more, rock,
Yeah,
straight rock
brass.
oriented. Like you think of the main riff to Modern Love, which is great.
Yeah.
Never in a million years would you hear Steve Hackett play like that.
No.
Never.
Not even now.
No, not at
Not
all.
even GTR or whatever.
Oh, that's Ken's favorite record.
Nice. Nice.
Are we gonna go there?
Well, let's hear from
GTR?
Pete.
Like, God.
You have the OG of that, Ken, on vinyl?
What? GTR? I
Yeah.
think I probably have that on vinyl.
See?
I have it on
No.
vinyl.
I know it.
Unless I might have sold it, but it's probably hiding in there. I tell you what, I like it more than Squack It.
I would agree.
Well, I would agree there too.
So kind of like Ken was saying earlier, I hadn't listened to this in a while, not that long, because I ranked the Peter Gabriel catalog like maybe a year ago. So it's probably been about a year since I listened to this. And so I've been playing it this week, getting ready for this show. And yeah, I mean, it's a really strong album, really great debut. I think multiple of you have said, how much variety is on here. And you do get, the tiny bit of prog, you get some good rock stuff, get a little folky stuff, you get a blues song, you get the big epic 2 tracks at the end. I like a lot of it. I don't think there's really, for me, any song that I really don't like. I like, Moribund the Burgermeister is terrific. Salisbury Hill, it's a legendary track.
Mhm.
For my money, Salisbury Hill might be as good as any song on either of these 2 albums. Modern Love, I dig a lot. I like Humdrum and Slow Burn. Excuse Me is probably my least favorite track, but I don't mind that. Down to Dolce Vita and Here Comes the Flood are terrific, absolutely terrific. So I mean, this is a good album, good instrumentation. It's a different production, right? I mean, it is kind of big and bombastic and lots of things going on. And we've seen Peter Gabriel with lots of albums that don't really sound too much alike. I mean, he's kind of done that his whole career, but it's really good, really interesting hypnosis artwork on the album. So it's kind of cool, very cool. But this is excellent. I mean, this is a top-notch Genesis album. They basically pulled out a classic at a time where, a lot of people were in question about what they would do. How would they follow up, losing their front man? And as it turns out, they didn't skip a damn beat. And
Nope.
The first time I heard a lot of these songs was on Seconds Out, which is the first Genesis album I ever bought.
Same here.
I fell in love with all those versions, and then I heard the studio versions. I was like, wow, this is just as good. Because that's the one thing with me. It's like a lot of times if I get a live album first, I get really attached to those live versions, and I tend to not like the studio stuff as much. That's not really the case here, because I think they're very compatible. I think Squonk is terrific, even better live. I love you're talking about Michael Rutherford, those Taurus bass pedals on that, great. Robert Assault Battery is such a whimsical English song, right? I mean, Dance on a Volcano and Los Endos. Can you start or end an album any better than those 2? Those are like the best bookends you could possibly have. Entangled is lovely. Madman Moon is great. Ripples is just gorgeous. Again, one of their first kind of forays into pop that they would later, go to quite a bit. And I think the title track is quirky and fun and so British. It's a really good sounding album. I love the artwork on it. It's a home run. As strong as this is, to me, it's kind of no contest. This is just
I think this is a bit of an unfair fight.
I mean, it kind of is, right?
We have an established band of 4 excellent musicians who don't have to mess with their chemistry when they use a guy in the band to sing, even though he's new to it. And then you have the guy that left who didn't write much of the music from his previous band. He did a lot of the lyrics. Now he's in a studio with a producer. Now he's credited with all the songs except for one, which is co-written. But I'm sure Bob Ezrin had a lot of sway, and it's more of a studio created production than a band making an album. So
You can tell the difference.
and it's a big time difference. I think of Bob Ezrin's work, even later on with Momentary Lapse of Reason, whether you like it or not, Luis, that is a very produced album. There's a lot of extra stuff in there that if Pink Floyd were still a 4-piece, you wouldn't hear. It would just be the band doing it with maybe a little extra thing here and there. But that's trick of the tail. These 4 guys from the studio, they played all the stuff. they were a well-oiled machine. Peter Gabriel had to start from scratch and get hired guns to help him.
That's
So,
right.
that's
He
tough.
got
That's a
It's
tough
true
job.
enough. I mean, because a lot of the music,
Genesis
sorry,
was
sorry, Rick, I'm sorry. A
Right.
lot of the music for Trick of the Tail was, I think, written around like 75, and apparently Gabriel was still around when they started to write it. So, you got to wonder too, what would have happened if they bombed with Collins on vocals? What if the crowd or the fans didn't accept him? What then? Right? Like,
I think because he came from in-house, that was
Mm.
probably never going to happen.
Yep.
If they brought in someone totally fresh from the outside, well, we've
Yeah.
seen that happen before.
well, yeah, Ray
They're
Wilson.
lucky Phil could sing as well as he could.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to, right? He was
Yeah,
terrific.
vocal.
One thing we didn't talk about was It's Yourself.
Yes. Mhm.
Great song.
Anthony will be very happy about that. Mhm.
That's
So-
right.
So, when you listen to Los Endos, the piece that you don't recognize is taken from It's Yourself, which was the song that was left off the album and became the B-side. I don't remember, was it Ripples? I don't remember what it was the B-side of.
What's it? To Ripples,
think
yes. To
I
Ripples.
think, yeah. And by itself was a great song. And anyway. Pete, why don't we do in the future, why don't we do Please Don't Touch versus And Then There Were Three?
Oh.
I still think this show was still the battle.
Because that's,
I mean, there's a lot more. There's a lot of others.
but I like that idea because, what happened, it's the
Well,
same
you got
premise.
Chuck's
Right?
attention, that's for sure. When you said
Oh
that.
boy.
Mhm.
well, if we go back to
Chuck just woke up. Look at him. They just lit a fire under his ass. Look at him.
Now that we speak about Hackett, and we were talking about Foxtrot, there are a few songs on Voyage of the Acolyte that actually were written during Foxtrot as well. What's it? He did mention that a couple of, so if you do see them, I think there are 3 songs that he co-wrote with Mike Rutherford that he developed further for Voyage of the Acolyte. And I think that Entangled was something that he was dealing with, that he had brought up, I think, during the Lamb, and he just wound up developing further as it went onward. But Steve Hackett was full of ideas, but he could never get it across in Genesis, man. But that's what I liked about A Trick of a Tale, is that it's like you said, it's a clear sounding album, in comparison to the album that came after it. You would wish that that it wasn't so dense, that they were able to get all their ideas across. But Wind and Wandering is such a dense album, but I don't want to get into that right now. So once again, I'm just going to just
but
continue
great.
with that. Mhm.
But both of those artists, whether Genesis or Peter Gabriel, relied on friends, right? Because when Phil goes on tour, they call Bill, right, to come in and help another Prague brother. And it's interesting because it come from King Crimson Camp. And then to get Tony and Robert to come and play on his album, Peter, it's kind of interesting how that circle works. Where, if you are, you're stuck and you're trying to get your foot in as a solo artist, you call your Prague friends. That's kind of cool, though. The interest in history. I just didn't see how the Bob Ezrin story got together, because they recorded in Toronto and in Europe between two. So that's why you get that.
I think he was looking for producers and getting some ideas.
Yeah.
And Ezrin's the one that brought in all the musicians. He took.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
He
Oh,
took it
okay.
to
He
Vice.
counted on the friends. Eh?
Brought in all those guys.
Because
I
at the
see.
time,
That was my point. He was trying to make the anti-Genesis album. He went out of his way to make an album that didn't sound remotely like Genesis. He didn't want to be typecast as the prog rock vocalist,
But you used Prague people.
well, remember,
Well,
remember,
you use what you know. So he brought.
Well, let's put it this
But also
way.
Bob Ezrin brought them in. He didn't pick them.
Yeah, I mean, the only
Yeah.
guy that he brought in was Fripp.
Right.
Well, let's put
Tony
it this way
and-
again.
Oh, he didn't know Tony. He didn't know Tony Levin. Wouldn't know Tony Levin if he tripped over him. Tony Levin
Bob Ezrin brought Tony
was
Levin in.
playing with Linda Ronstadt and Paul Simon.
Mhm.
But again, let's not forget, out of the two camps between Gabriel and Genesis, I mean, Gabriel had the one that had to prove the most. I mean,
Yeah,
because he left a successful group. And there was a lot of backbiting going on while they were, going through the Lamb Lies Down number. I mean, during the tour for the Lamb, I mean, Collins has been known to say, look, at that point, he was in the group 3 years from Nursery Crime, and he was getting pissed off with doing the tour because there were times when that Gabriel could not get the microphone close to his mouth to sing the songs because of the costumes he was wearing. And he was like, and he was thinking, like, enough of this shit. Like, we have to perform this, we've got dates booked. We need to perform this album. We need to get it done.
Plus, Gabriel blindsided the band big time when he announced
exactly. I mean, and the last show on the tour was canceled because of poor ticket sales. So that they were told that the second to last night, this is the last night. The show tomorrow night's canceled, and they're all looking at each other in the dressing room, going, "Okay, so this is the last show, right?" And apparently, Gabriel played the last post on the oboe, and they just they did the show. But let's not forget, they're exes for a reason. Like, people leave for a reason. There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that that we as the public don't know, right?
The good thing is, they put all that behind them, and by the time they found out Peter was making a solo album, they all wished him good luck, and obviously, they get along to this day. And Phil played on a few of his albums, so it's all good.
Yeah.
It's all good stuff.
Yeah, I think the split worked out
Yeah, I
pretty
think
well
so.
for everybody, right?
Right.
Even though most of us fans have been crying about it for decades. I think
Oh.
it's
Hey,
as far as they're
if
concerned.
this split didn't happen, we never would have gotten Invisible Touch. So they have that.
Oh
Well,
my God.
As much as people hate
Yeah, I
it,
like Invisible
it's
Touch
their
too,
most
it's got its
successful
moments.
album, But another thing that we have to remember about Peter Gabriel during this time is that he also had the band Happy the Man as his as his backing band for his live shows. But
Well, he auditioned them. They never played.
Yeah, once he heard that, he was like, nah, too much like Genesis. Goodbye, guys.
Just imagine that, right?
Oh yeah.
Gabriel's coming out with a new album too this year at some point.
Yeah,
So
sometime.
That's what they're saying in the tour. So
Peter's first tour, I mean, he did one Genesis song and that was it. I don't even think starting with this for the second album, I don't think he did The Lamb, because that's
was the Supper's Ready?
No, he did
The
back in New York City.
He did back, I don't even remember, but he's through The Lamb. He would encore with The Lamb. And
always liked his version of The Lamb.
maybe he might have done back in New York City, but that was it. He never,
He moved on.
Mhm.
Yeah, and he made it a point. He moved on right away.
Yeah.
So it's interesting talking about the production of that album, and I think if anybody wants to compare, get like a listen of the Bob Ezrin sound from that time period, go listen to this back to back with Kiss Destroyer, back to back with Welcome to My Nightmare by Alice Cooper. Very similar sound across all three albums. They all had the Bob Ezrin sounds in them because he had a certain way, especially in the 70s.
Yep.
Well, it's like Peter said, who can I get that'll give me a sound that'll be so far removed from Genesis? I know Bob Ezrin. He just did that new Kiss album.
Because I've always thought that the Kiss album, like the drums on Destroyer, were a little like tinny sounding, like very like
They're
like,
just different.
Overproduced, maybe.
Yeah. There's a
I
lot of
don't know,
reverb
just
on
very
them. Yeah.
to me very like the only way I can describe it is small, like not bombastic drums by any
Mhm.
Yeah.
stretch of the imagination. So I don't.
There's a bigness about his productions around that time frame.
Well,
Definitely. I mean, you listen to the second Peter Gabriel album, and it sounds completely different.
completely different. Yeah, I did. I
It wasn't
listened
until
to them
Peter's
back to
third
back.
album that you actually got to hear him, come into his own.
Oh, yeah.
There was hints on the first two albums, but by the third album, he made what most believe is his opus, and from there he just took off career-wise.
No cymbals.
No symbols, yes, no symbols.
Well, I mean, he hit his commercial peak with
Yeah.
in '86, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it got to the point where he removed Sledgehammer and Big Time from from rotation. He took them off the market because they were getting overplayed. So
Yeah, those songs were everywhere. Oof.
Oh yeah.
In
Couldn't
Canada,
go anywhere without
they were
hearing
all over the
those.
place.
That's
On Much
crazy.
Music and stuff. So
Yeah.
Well, the song that I loved off of that was Mercy Street and Red Rain.
Oh, Red Rain is
Okay.
tremendous.
I like Red
a
Rain.
lot of
Voice
great-
again.
There were a lot of great songs on it. I think I've seen Peter Gabriel live more than any other performer.
Wow.
Wow.
I mean, he would come around.
Zero.
He'd be at the Palladium, and I would go to every show.
I've never seen him.
Yeah, I
I
haven't either. I'd like to go at least once.
I saw him 19. I guess it was 78. I saw him at the Bottom Line.
Nice.
He was at
Twice.
the Bottom Line. Yeah, Robert
Maybe if
Fripp
he
was,
tours, we'll go
Robert
see
Fripp
him.
was sitting there with Tony Stratton Smith, or
Dusty
maybe it was
Rhodes.
Tony Smith, and then Fripp's sitting there eating, and then he puts down his knife and fork, and he disappears, and he comes out on stage for the last 20 minutes of the show.
Nice.
So,
That's
and,
crazy.
and it was pretty funny watching Robert Fripp play tambourine on Lamb Lies Down the Road. It was pretty fun.
It's
But,
more fun to watch his wife play.
and then he came, and then
Yeah.
Peter came back. He played in New York. He played at the Palladium, and then Fripp came out again. But Fripp came out for like the last 25 minutes or so. The big signature piece with Fripp was "Do the Kinks All Day, All of the Night." Fripp would just like go off. That was really
Nice.
cool.
Ah, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean,
Good memories.
early on, Peter. I mean, he couldn't get arrested, so here he was. He was playing the Bottom Line. 30 minutes of it got broadcast on King Biscuit, so that got out there.
And now he's playing huge places when he does. Yeah.
Yeah,
The first Gabriel song that I realized I knew it was Gabriel that I heard was "Shock the Monkey," and then I didn't realize that Salisbury Hill was Gabriel,
yeah.
right? Because I heard it as a kid, 8 years old. You don't know who the artist is, but I mean, "Shock the Monkey" was my first exposure to Gabriel.
Yeah,
And then when I found
he
out
was
he
that
was-
Frontiers and Salisbury
Yeah.
Hill. I remember
Salisbury
hearing a lot. early
Being a
on.
child of MTV, Shock the Monkey was my introduction, and they played it all the time.
Constantly.
Back then, I thought it was bizarre, and I was
Yeah,
liked
the
it. but
video
later
just
that I
threw
really
me, right? And when I was told, oh, he used to be in Genesis, I'm like, get the fuck out of here, man. Are you kidding me? And no, my brother-in-law showed me some albums. He goes, here. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I had no I had no idea, right? So
You are not alone. I bet you there's people still to this day who like a lot of that poppy Genesis stuff from the 80s and 90s and have no
I had
idea
no clue,
Gabriel
yep.
was ever in the band.
but that's just it. Like I remember hearing songs like "Follow You, Follow Me" on the radio. Like I was like 8 years old. I grew up in the house of three sisters, so music was always on. Like it didn't matter what it was. So you had a good cross section, and rock was part of it. So I mean, it's you don't pick up on those things when you're that age, right? Like who's this or who's that, right? So,
Yeah.
but,
maybe we should compare "So" to "Invisible Touch," the two gems of 1986.
Wow.
Whereas, right.
can I say something? To me, Invisible Touch has lost its touch. I gotta say.
Never had a touch.
Yeah, never had such.
Well, for me, it did. I mean, for me, it did. Like I did. There are, heavier songs on there, like "Tonight," and "The Last Domino," right? I mean, those, the two-parter. The rest of it, it got overplayed. It's just like there's 8 songs on the album, and 6 of them were singles. Like, come on, like what I mean? Like, it's just overkill. Right?
It was neurotic, man.
Armando missed
The
the
neurotic.
Prague,
Yeah, I remember that one too.
Armando missed the Prague Turds episode we did.
Yeah.
No, I watched the
Oh.
Prog. I've watched every episode you guys have done. So no, I mean,
Yeah, we roasted that one.
Yeah, Chad was on fire for that one.
well,
Get me started.
but I mean, that was Genesis at their height of pop. I mean,
Plus, hey, we didn't say Peter apparently has an album coming out the end of the year.
Yep.
New studio album.
Yep. We'll see.
yeah.
I hope it's an improvement over the last one.
The last one was
We'll see.
What
was
was
like-
the last one? Sorry,
Up.
Was that Up? I think.
Up. Okay.
Yeah.
That was the
And
last
Yeah. Okay.
proper album.
That was the last one.
Yeah.
That's
That
the
was
last
really,
proper album. Yeah.
and that was really forgettable. It was like when that came out, it was like I waited 10 years for that.
Yeah.
That was like Us Part 2.
Is that the one with the gray cover? Like,
Yes, with the water droplets.
yeah, with the
With his
okay.
face on it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
okay.
just that was a disappointment.
Yeah, it's just bland.
All right. Well,
All right. Well, there you have it, everybody. The albums after the split. Who did it better? Everybody here voted for this one. But, you know, everybody watching at home, feel free to cast your vote for which of these two really, really good albums, right? So it's kind of hard when you have to choose between two really good ones, but we all felt personally that this one's just a bit better. But we love them anyway, and we're going to continue to listen to them. That's what it's all about. It's just kind of talking about what these artists do once they go their separate ways, right? So we'll be seeing more in this series in the weeks to come. So thanks for watching, everybody. Visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. All together, all the time.
damn
time.
For Chuck Alvarez and Armando Venditti, Ken Golden, Rick Labonte, and Chad Hutchinson, I am Pete Pardo. Good night, everybody. See you next Tuesday. Take care.
Good night, everyone.
Have a good night.